Cherie Mylordis, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Kylie, and hello to your listeners. It's great to have this conversation with you. I know we have a lot in common. And as you know, I'm on a mission to help leaders and organizations reimagine work and really evolve the way they lead and the way they work to bring out the best in their people and deliver purposeful outcomes and purposeful change.
Yes,
That's
and
like
your big, is that what we call a big, hairy, audacious goal? Or
Absolutely, that's it.
Yeah. So, look, for me, this conversation, Cherie, is well overdue. And I'm going to put it down to COVID, but, let's just, we can put everything down to COVID, right?
Sure.
But look, I say it's well overdue because we first sparked a connection pre-COVID, around a very similar passion. And and then I noticed that you've published, recently published a book, well, a white paper called Rethinking the Future of Work, and it really struck a chord with me. And I'm going to get stuck straight into the headline of your bold statement, as a way to set the context for today's conversation, really. And you say work practices are no longer fit for purpose, and it's hindering our ability to meet today's challenges. So can you please, maybe this is a great time to also introduce, kind of a little bit more about what you do and, why you say that.
Sure. Well, I've spent decades working in complex change in a whole range of different roles and with many different organizations. And it's really struck me that whilst we've made incredible progress with the way we work and with technology, we've had 4 industrial revolutions. It's phenomenal what we've achieved. But the big thing that people may not realize is that the way we organize people and work actually hasn't changed much in over 100 years. So I'll give you a couple of examples. The org chart is over 100 years old. Now that was designed, the brains were at the top, and then we have people in boxes doing what they're told by the people up the top. So work was then about repetitive tasks. It was about, muscle or repeating instructions. So you didn't need people to use their initiative when they were in those boxes inside the pyramid. And that's very different to today. Yet we still have our pyramid org chart. Most organizations have one. And then even 9 to 5, that's from working in factories. So we've just kept some rigid constraints that no longer serve us. So that's my bold claim.
I love that. And, I think I've read a number of, look, I share the same passion as you obviously know. And I think it's fair to say that model really is certainly a manufacturing based era management model and managing process. And here we are today in the an economy where people are far more educated. They don't need holding hand. In fact, it limits their potential and it limits their creativity in a whole raft of things. And so I guess the big question then is, what do you think needs to happen? Because this is probably a decade, let's say at least a decade. There's probably been a lot of us who have been harping on about the need for these kind of structural changes and transformation, and we're just still not quite seeing it. So what do you think think's missing?
Well, I think, as you say, this has been around for a long time. And perhaps something positive that's come out of the pandemic is that it's sort of drawn attention to the fact that those traditional rule books may not serve us when we have to rapidly change. And we had to change rapidly more than ever before during COVID. So even the most traditional leaders had to, make decisions on a daily or hourly basis, which was very different to their usual style of management. And I say management deliberately instead of leadership, which is that, delivering those instructions. So I think we've reached this signpost in the evolution of work. And I think this is a moment to really call this out, because the whole world has had to change. Like, everyone's had to throw out their rule books. And so every organization and every leader is now grappling with, well, what does the future of work look like? And the most obvious thing we hear about is hybrid working, 4-day weeks, all of that. We're just wasting so much oxygen on that. And whilst I'm a big fan of 4-day weeks and, working more effectively in less time, that is not the answer. And if that's all that comes out of this chaos from a work perspective, we've missed this enormous opportunity. Because before we reset our operating model to that old way with a few little upgrades on that well-trodden path, we need to stop and think, well, if this doesn't serve us, let's embark on a new path. And so what I think is missing is that acknowledgement first, that awareness, and then it's about, well, what does that look like?
There's a couple of things you mentioned there that I actually want to put the spotlight on, which is also why we called this interview today the future is now. And you make the claim that not only are traditional models not fit for purpose, but you also then did mention the importance of the consideration about what is that future way of working. But the reason we call today the future is now is because, especially in the work of transformation, which I know is certainly your approach, it's being able to almost put your spotlight on what we imagine the best kind of ideal outcome is out there in the future, and then be able to bring it back to the present moment in a way to kind of have it working right now. Because I do think there's, we can get stuck thinking, oh, well, the future of work is someday, one day out there. But the reality is, no, you cannot assume or think that somehow that one day out there is, it needs to happen right now, because the impact inside of an organization is huge. So I know you did some research, right? And why don't we go there? Because I think it puts some emphasis on what we're hearing from within some organisations. And I don't also want to dismiss the fact that I know, certainly at this time, Cherie, we know, and I know you've referenced, there are a lot of organisations, especially startups in the entrepreneurial area, who really are carving out these new ways of working. But why don't we start with the research that you've just recently done? Do you want to give us a bit of a background to that and tell us about what you discovered?
Sure. Well, I instinctively felt that most people weren't doing their best work, just through my own experiences working in transformation, working with lots of different organizations. So I had this anecdotal evidence, but I wanted to go deeper and say, well, is this widely representative or not of what's going on? So last year, in the middle of last year, mid-2022, I interviewed 120 leaders around the world. And I had 8 questions. Are you doing your best work? Yes, no, or sometimes. Explain. Why did you answer that? And then there were some follow-up questions. And surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly to many, probably 2/3 of people said they were not always doing their best work. So either sometimes or no. But what was so fascinating, Kylie, was that even those people, those leaders that said, yes, I'm doing my best work, then when I asked them those follow-up questions, they talked about all these constraints that were holding them back. And so I think they answered yes because they felt, well, I'm at the top of my game. I'm great at what I do, so I'm doing my best work. But then they talked about these constraints that were hindering the value that they could deliver. And so in actual fact, and then I followed up this year with an online survey because I really wanted to see if anything had changed in the 12 months, because as I said earlier, we're all emerging out of this pandemic, figuring out what the future looks like. So I really wanted to check in and see what was going on. So I got another 120 or so leaders, and across the 2 sample sets, there are about 200 in common. So I say around 200 people I spoke to across the 2 years. Some answered twice, some answered just in one of those exercises, and really nothing much had changed. And so, yeah, in actual fact, only one of those leaders out of those roughly 200 leaders said they are currently doing the best work of their life. Only one.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So imagine the value that's left on the table there. Imagine the productivity impact of organizations. Imagine what they're wasting. Imagine how unfulfilled and undervalued leaders are feeling. And also, based on my conversations, it was clear that this extends to the broader workforce.
Just a question about the scope with the leaders that you spoke to. So I know that you've spoken to various people from around the world. Were these people that were purely CEO level? Were they C-suite? Were they a mix?
It was a mix, actually, Kylie. It was 24 countries were involved, and it just so happened that they represented 24 different industries. And they really did span that board and C-suite level through to that sort of mid-senior management role type level, and then into specialist project leaders, so in project management, change management, those sorts of things. So really quite a wide spectrum. A few emerging leaders that are, you know, in the younger generation, but yeah, quite a spread.
So if you had to, well, look, I mean, there's probably many different reasons across the board, but if you had to kind of call out what you noticed or some of your insights about what was at the source of them not doing their best work, what were some of what did you discover?
Great question. Well, I trawled through all of the comments, and because it was open-ended questions, I had a lot of data to trawl through.
Well, that must have been fun to get through.
It took a long time, yeah, because,
Imagine.
you know, I was really wanted to take this seriously. But what I found, Kylie, was that all of their answers fell into one of three buckets. The first bucket was that purpose and strategy. The second was leadership and culture. And the third, which was really interesting right now, is work environment and well-being. So if you were to, you know, look at if that was a bar chart, the purpose and strategy and the work environment and well-being was smaller. The leadership and culture was huge. But interestingly, it was really purpose and strategy that was a cornerstone of everything else. So those leaders that were doing their best work in any capacity said they had a clear purpose. There was clarity on direction and priorities. And so they knew what was needed and what the direction was and how they could contribute to that. So that was really critical. But then it was the leadership and culture that was causing the most angst. And it really came down to that, you know, micromanagement, bureaucracy, that command and control, you know, stay in your box, stay in your lane, do what you're told. Decisions bounce around to those upper echelons and take forever, which causes frustration. So that was huge. But also a really huge revelation was that the pandemic has had a profound impact on what people are not prepared to tolerate at work anymore. So their thresholds have changed, and what they value and what they want to balance has really changed.
So, like any great piece of research, I imagine you have a few recommendations
I do.
and solutions. You know, I think if we point to some of that. So, what did you pull out in terms of the call to actions or opportunities for people?
I've really summarized it in a very simple way. And of course, there's layers underneath this, Kylie, but I wanted to come up with something that was intuitive and that could inspire practical action without people having to go on big, you know, leadership programs or masterclasses. And so I came up with this concept of work in 3D. And so the 3Ds are dare, ditch, and dial. So dare is about that bold purpose. You know, what is it why do you exist? And it has to be more than just, you know, the profit, the bottom line, or, you know, serving your shareholders or other stakeholders. There has to be something that is meaningful that you do to inspire that action. And there's plenty of research to back this up. This isn't just, you know, something I've dreamt up. There's abundant evidence that this is important. So the first D is about dare. So it's really about prompting leaders to say, do you have a purpose? Is it clear? Is it digestible? And are you bringing that to life in how you show up every day? And the next piece to that is, do you encourage your people to uncover their purpose? Because if you can find a link between what drives individuals and where you're going as an organization, that's when you really get people intrinsically motivated and really energized and really committed. And so you don't have to think about this quiet quitting and slow work and all these silly things that you're seeing on social media at the moment. So that's the first D. The second D is for ditch. So it's about discarding those outdated practices that no longer serve you. And it's about inviting your people to contribute to that. And you can make it fun. And of course, you know, endless meetings and emails jumping around all over the place are obvious ones. But there's often other things, like maybe it's your procurement processes, and maybe there's other things that, well, we've just always done it this way. Well, maybe we could rethink that. And then the final D is for dial. So it's really dialing up those proven contemporary ways of working that really are going to help you work and lead in a fit for purpose way for our rapidly, uncertain and changing world. And we know where to look. That's the thing. There are examples of how organizations have been working this way for decades, but they're not, well understood. There's not a high profile of these. So you don't have to drive into the fog if you're choosing that new road, that signpost I mentioned earlier. You can actually, draw on proven ways of working, which is great.
I hear a very strong thread of courage all the way through there. In particular, well, all three, but the aspect of ditch, I certainly, I know there's a comment that you mentioned about it's, we've always done it that way, therefore it sticks around. But I've also heard comments, I suspect, given what we know and what I've seen as a coach, that often ditching something can be detrimental to one's experience of, let's just say question their ego in one. Say, if you've made a decision to do something, then how does it look if you then decide to ditch it? I mean, we could probably apply that principle to everything in life, really, right? You make a decision to do something and then you go, well, I probably dare not ditch it, because if I ditch it, that's not going to look good and that's going to make me look bad. What have you got some on the court examples of things that you've noticed where you think doing the ditches proven valuable, or where people should really take a look?
Well, I've been working with this amazing organization in the Philippines. It's a big conglomerate, and their CEO and their leadership team are really passionate about creating that startup mindset within this enormous company. Well, it's a lot of companies all under the one umbrella. And they really want to get that entrepreneurial thinking across their people, their high performers, their high potentials. And so what they did last year was they ran what they called a Super Ditch Day. And it had branding, and people were invited to form teams ahead of this Super Ditch Day, which was on the 15th of September. So it had a lot of profile. And people could organically create teams. They didn't have to work within their current team. And then on the day, there was a big fanfare, and then they had spotlights around the company of teams and what they were ditching. And so they had this one day to come up with ideas for each business unit. And then they pitched ideas to ditch. And the really clever thing they did was they created a live dashboard. So for every business unit, they had this dashboard that showed how many ideas they had pitched to ditch. And then over the weeks, they showed how many they were actually acting on. And so what it did was it created that grassroots movement of input, really encouraging people to share things. But what it also did was created that healthy internal competition. Oh, the power group has ditched 20 already. What's the thinking group doing, And so it was really cool to just spark that energy and drawing that attention to it. So that was a wonderful idea of making it fun and making it engaging and saying, we're serious about this and we want to hear what you have to say. And procurement was a big one, I might say.
Wow, that is brilliant. You remind me about the principle of context. The context is really decisive. If you see it as a threat, then it'll be a threat. Or if you see it as an opportunity and you create it as fun, then look out and enjoy the ride.
That's a great way of putting it.
Oh, honestly, I love that. I'm also reminded of, the show. Well, I don't know if did you ever watch Shark Tank? I'm pretty sure it's a global program. We're all good on talking a lot about pitch your ideas. I love this thing. Pitch the ditch. What is it? That's so great. That is just gold. In fact, I dare challenge anyone today, if you're listening to this, honestly, if this is the one thing you take out of today's interview, I know even for myself, Cherie, there was a point in my career when I stepped out of the corporate world and started my own business, and I underestimated the impact of working from home with 3 young children, right?
Oh, yes.
And I was attempting to continue to live my life like I was still in the office working in a corporate environment. And I had to do a lot of ditching. Like
Yeah.
I was really, to be really frank, I was very pissed off. I was resentful. I was frustrated. I'm like, why the heck can't I get these kids to do anything? Why do I have to be the one who does everything around here and yada, yada, yada. And
Mm.
I remember sitting on the what do you call those lay down anyway, the lounge chair beside, I can't forget it, right? I was by the pool on my lounge chair and I went, something has to change here. And I
Yeah.
started making a list of all the things I was going to stop
Mm. You have
doing.
to. Yeah.
But the confronting part was, oh my God, well, if I stop that, there are certain things that I can certainly ditch, but there were also things that I went, well, I need to stop doing them, but they need to still happen. so,
Yes.
so there are things that I needed to deal with in terms of delegating. Like, how do I, at work when you're in a hierarchy model, as we all know, well, go delegate. That's a lot easier to do when you're the boss and you're paying somebody called, here's your job, go do that. But in today's climate, as we know in leadership's not the same. And in my personal experience, it is very much like being a parent, because you can't go to your kids and say, you should do this because I said you should do it. Number one, they're not getting paid to do it. And number two, a kid does not care
Yeah.
for doing dishes. So I really love that. Your challenge to people to do these 3Ds is what about the dialing up?
Mm.
What have you noticed about a success story in the area of that?
Well, I think it comes down to that, what is the dare, and setting that direction, and then getting out of the way and saying, well, how might you solve this challenge? And people need to be stretched a little bit, right? So, we need that purpose. We need to create that autonomy so that we're not micromanaging and, giving very specific instructions and saying, this is the outcome we're trying to achieve, or this is the challenge, or this is the opportunity. Come up with your ideas on how we might do that, because you never know where the next idea might come from. And so, but I think the ditch is good to do first, because it frees up some space for then people to go, well, how might we work in a better way? So, I mean, so many examples.
Well, let me can I ask you a different question? I'm going because I did really put you on the spot there, but and mostly because when we're having a yarn, I was asking about some of your success stories. So I'm going to ask you, what do you dial up? I know you've taken a lot of your lessons in the work that you do to be passionate about purpose-driven business, because you talk a lot about purpose, and that got ignited for you when you spent a good 5 years working around the Sydney Olympics and Paralympic Games. And from what I've heard you share about that experience, was quite extraordinary. So why don't I actually ask you, from your personal perspective, when you look at some of the success that you've experienced, what would you say was one of the things, or you're welcome to say as many as you like, something that you dialed up that really worked for you?
The thing that comes to mind, Kylie, is being more bold and courageous about collaboration. And so, none of us can really have all the answers. And I think the Olympics proved that to me as well. It's like, we had this enormous, goal for the world to see. There was no hiding away from that. There was a fixed date, it was enormous pressure. And I was quite terrified at the beginning, to be honest. But so we had to collaborate. We had to figure it out. And we didn't have time to go up and down the command and control and ask permission. We just radically collaborated, and we had to collaborate beyond organizational boundaries as well, with other agencies, with community groups. And so we had that air cover. We had that sort of, we had wonderful leaders who helped us with navigating this terrain and politics and stakeholders and all that kind of thing. But they just let us get on with it. And so that, to me, is a big insight. And I've become a lot more courageous over the years in how I collaborate. And so when I coach teams, I do a lot of innovation sprints or boot camps, and I coach teams. And we get permission from the executive for some of those traditional rules of engagement to be, they're off the table for this particular initiative. And so they have permission to go and, seek input from any senior leader in the organization and to go beyond. And at first they're a bit scared to do that. They're like, oh, what do you mean I can go and talk to that CFO or that whatever, CIO? And we encourage them, we help them prepare for that, and they do it. And they're always amazed with the response they get. And then we show them how to contact thought leaders and experts around the world through our networks. And they're blown away where people that are just gurus in a space will jump on a call with them with like a day's notice. It's incredible. And so I think that's what I've learned is be bold and audacious and daring about who you might collaborate with, who you might reach out to, and encourage those that you work with to do the same. You do have to get permission from the top when it is, like a little initiative, but it actually, if you can bring that into a little side initiative and show what happens, and, the world doesn't end. There's no major crisis when you go and talk to someone 3 levels above you. And then it can start to bring some of those behaviors back into the world of the day job as well, and start to shift the culture.
Yeah. So I want to flip back to your experience and journey as well in this field. Just even as a business owner and having done a lot of work in the area of transformation, from your, what do you think at the moment is probably one of the biggest challenges or hurdles that you think that we've got to navigate at the moment that, I guess I don't even know what I would add to that after that, but I think, what is the hardest thing to navigate at the moment in accomplishing this kind of new way of approaching work?
Well, I think so much oxygen is going into this. Are we mandating people back into the office? Are we dictating how many days they come in? Are we dappling with, 4-day weeks? It's just taking so much time and energy, and it's taking away from the bigger picture. So, and what I'm seeing is where there is the mandate, people are really resisting that. And it certainly came through in my research loud and clear. Some people would say, I have no desire to work 5 days a week in the office ever again. I would sacrifice my role or my salary in order to achieve that. Now, of course, we need to earn enough so that, we can live. We don't want to be, in a dire situation. But if money is, something that if we can earn enough to live off, people will sacrifice those things for that work-life balance. So they're saying, I want to be able to do my exercise in the morning or have breakfast with my family if it means that I can work productively from home. But they've also missed that intentional in-person connection. So they want to go back to the office, but they don't want to have the commute and miss out on those morning things to go to work and sit at a screen, sit at a desk. It's like, what's the point, right? So they want to feel empowered. They want there to be some flexibility in where they work. And I'm seeing that some organizations are doing that really well. One that comes to mind is, I think it's 2 to 3 days a week they have to go into the office, but Wednesday is a day when everyone goes in. And the CEO of this company I know very well, and she says, it's a noisy day, and I love it. Like she's okay with people catching up and chit-chatting, and maybe there's some personal stuff as well as some work stuff, but it's creating that buzz and that connection, and she embraces that. And so it's a way of saying, look, I want you to come in for a reason. I don't want to mandate it. So I feel like that is a big thing. We've just got to get past this. We've just got to say, talk to your people, figure out what's going to work. What is the rhythm that's going to mean that we get the best of both worlds? Because you are going to disengage your people. People are going to feel very, again, it's that micromanagement that you don't trust me. You want to see me back in the office. If you can't get past that, I believe you're going to either have very disengaged people that aren't performing, or people are just going to leave.
Yeah. So I want to come back to one of the things that you are both of us are very passionate about, and it is your first D around purpose, because you do also, we started on your statement that, today's operating models for the most part are not fit for purpose. When you say fit for purpose or purpose, what are you, could you give us like a on the court, why don't you share us, I suppose, even your purpose and why you're saying fit for purpose is important?
So the two words I absolutely love are enable extraordinary. And that's my tagline for my company, because I feel that what I can do in terms of adding value is enabling others to do extraordinary things. And so it's really giving other people that agency, that courage, that capability, whatever it is they need to do something more bold, more meaningful. And the extraordinary word, it's a word I absolutely love, because I think it means something unusual that's special in a good way. And extraordinary can mean different things to different people. So what's extraordinary to you? Amazing, but that might not be what's extraordinary to me, and that's okay. So, and what I have found in my coaching work, that when I work with leaders or even emerging leaders, high potentials, high performers, when I work with them and help them become braver and step out of their comfort zone in a guided and supported way, they achieve extraordinary things. And it's beyond what they could have imagined. And so I want to amplify that, because that's how we solve the problems in the world, right? We enable others to go after something bold. So when I say fit for purpose, I guess there's two layers to that. One is do ways of working suit our current world, which is, uncertain, rapidly changing, technologies emerging at the speed of light, and we're all trying to get our heads around it, so all this stuff is just coming at us. It's like we're on a ship and there's these speedboats zooming up behind us. We're like, whoa, I didn't even hear that coming,
Yes.
So we can't use 100-year-old org chart or, rigid job descriptions in order to respond to that, because people are like, well, that's not my job. I'm following these things in my job description. Where more progressive organizations define more about, what are the outcomes you want to achieve? What is your success profile is a wonderful word I've used. So it again creates more flexibility. It's like you're responsible for this area, but how you do that, we're not going to be too prescriptive. And that's an enormous difference. So fit for purpose, I think, is about, does it suit our needs? Then there's, well, what is your purpose as an organization? And it needs to be what I call outward focused. So it doesn't describe what you do as an organization. It's not your mission. What it does, it describes the impact you want to have to uplift certain communities, or, whatever it is that you want to achieve. So I'll give you an example. Favorite not-for-profit I work with, I've been working with them for years in a pro bono capacity, is Odyssey House, New South Wales. Now, they do amazing programs, both live-in rehabilitation programs and community programs for people struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Now, the vision of Odyssey House, which to me suits the definition of a purpose, is a world free of addiction. Now, there's about 150 people that work for Odyssey House in New South Wales, and they're probably never going to achieve a world free of addiction. But that inspires how they show up every day, right? So that means that they're very sharing about what they learn, they're connected with other players, and they've got evidence and they've got outcomes that they help people through that addiction, and they help them live a vital life, because it's a holistic approach. It involves their family. It's, it addresses a lifestyle perspective, not just getting them off whatever they're on. And so for me, that's a wonderful example of an amazing, inspiring purpose statement. And it's okay to have a purpose statement that you might not reach, but it needs to inspire you, and it needs to be something that you bring to life in how you show up every day.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's I'm much the same, when there's a lack of clarity for people, certainly at the level of individual, when you're talking to leaders about what is their purpose. And I often will say, well, often it's easier for you if you don't have clarity of your own at this point. I go look at what your organization's purpose is, and if there's a lack of clarity there, I mean, it's a very simple question to ask yourself. Well, the company only exists to serve the customers, because if the customers aren't there, it doesn't exist. So therefore, your purpose will be directly attributed to the job or what you're intending to do for the customer. That is simply put. So put your attention on the customer instead of yourself.
That's right.
But how many people do that? Like, we don't do that, right? I mean,
That's right.
you and I know, and I loved when I asked you about purpose, your purpose statement, yes, it's your byline, but you were very quick to point out that you have a very deep personal sense of purpose. It's not just a tagline for you. And that resonated a lot with me, because mine's the same. After 30 years of being in business, my current work is, I'm a researcher and strategist and worked in media and marketing for decades. And to do the work that I'm doing now came as a result of a turning point for myself, a pivotal moment for myself, which was anchored off a purpose to create connection. So it was very much for me, it was designed from within, that carved out this kind of next juncture for me. And so when you said that, I was like, this is remarkable. Was there a story that you want to share about why those two words are particularly important for you? Like, was there something that struck you that was really powerful for you, why that was so important?
Well, I stepped out of the corporate world about 5 years ago now, because I just felt like I wasn't able to deliver value. I developed this passion for extraordinary organizations, and I follow them, and there's incredible ones around the world that, they might have 100 people, they might have more than 10,000 people, and they're working in a radically progressive way. So self-organizing teams, the CEO is there purely to serve the teams. There's some incredible examples. So I've been really inspired by these organizations. And I felt like even when I could share a case study with stakeholders that was directly relevant to the work that they were doing, they were like, oh, that's very interesting, Cherie. And then they go back to their 80s style of working. And I just got very frustrated and thought, I just need to step out. I can't do this anymore. And so then I started working on these innovation sprints and connecting with innovators around the world with this particular model, where we look at the common traits of the fastest growing organizations in the world, and we coach teams through these boot camps to expand their worldview and think differently. And that's when I just, really thought about that word of enabling, because it's, that's what brings me joy. If I can see other people doing incredible things and stepping up and being confident and courageous and really looking at that purpose-driven outcomes. And that's where the word extraordinary came from. Like, everyone was doing extraordinary things, which are very different from person to person, from team to team. So yeah, that's where that came from. And I've just really latched onto it, and it's just become really part of my identity.
It's fabulous. It's a really great way to look at it. I think if you're somebody who doesn't have clarity over that for yourself, you remind me again, it's probably not surprising, mine's all about connection, meaningful connections, because all I could hear in what you're saying was the patterns. And so, if you're on that journey and there's no clarity yet for you, that's a really great, I think what you've highlighted there is the opportunity to really pay attention to what you're noticing in your environment, and to look for some commonality in what you see. And if you look at the commonality, you will certainly come up with some keywords that will identify what that is. Cherie, God, I could talk to you forever, and there's so much value that we could share and do. But what I would like to end on, Cherie, one of the ways that we like to end the podcast is for you, to share your view about, what it looks like to be a leader. So I'm going to give you a statement. I'm going to ask you to complete the statement for me. And the statement is, a leader is someone who...
Well, I think a leader is someone who really inspires and empowers people to do work that's meaningful and work that makes a difference in some way. So what they do is they create this constructive environment that really values, solving problems, collaborating, embracing feedback, and always learning.
Well, thank you so much for today. And just one final call to action. What is the best location for people to be able to contact you?
Sure, you can reach me via LinkedIn. I'm the only Cherie Mylordis on LinkedIn.
Oh, nice.
And my website is nextgenify.com. You can contact me via nextgenify.com, or you can email me at cherie@nextgenify.com.
Fantastic. So Nextgenify, I forgot to mention that company name right up front, but we did introduce you at the beginning. So fabulous name, by the way. So thank you again so much for joining me today. And yeah, I look forward to applying. Oh, and I will throw a call out to everybody. If you didn't yet pick it up, be sure to go back and get the 3Ds. Take a good look at your own leadership, and each day see what it is that you can do to dare to be courageous and graceful in connecting with your purpose. The second one was look at what you can dial down. Ditch, 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 ditch. What can you ditch? And then thirdly, what are you going to dial up? A really simple practice that I invite you to take out of today's interview, and you could do it anywhere. You could do it starting your day, you could do it at the beginning of a meeting, or maybe you could even go and challenge one of your staff to do that. Try and see if you can get on with Cherie's mission to empower people to work in 3D. And I look forward to don't forget to share your insights on any of the platforms that we've got, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Kylie. And I would love to hear what your listeners are doing in terms of embracing the 3Ds.
Fantastic.